afternoon, everybody. It is Friday, November 28th, 2014. It's Black Friday. And the way I know it's Black Friday is because I found myself getting a little laugh out of all the news reports I've been seeing of people fighting over stuff at the shopping malls and the retail stores. Two of the most prominent ones I read this morning, two ladies fighting over a Barbie doll and some other women fighting over some cheap undies in Europe. So it's definitely Black Friday. So hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving. I sure did. It was a great time spent with family and had some great food. Probably ate my weight in Thanksgiving food, and that's always fun. Anyways, I want to jump right into it. I want to do kind of a wrap up to kind of end this Ferguson series I've been on. I did one video and two podcasts so far, and I want to kind of wrap everything up. And I want to keep this one short, sweet, and to the point. And so I'll just jump right in. After seeing all the violence, all the stuff that had gone on, all the different protests across the country, and I think at one point in time, it was said that there was protests going on in 37 different states simultaneously. It's scary. It's scary in a way because with social media being as prominent as it is, it's not hard for people to collaborate. And it wouldn't be hard for people to start violent protests all at once across the country. That's what makes it a little bit scary. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. I like to think that everybody is at least everybody's a prepper in some way. I like to put preppers in three different brackets. There's bare bones preppers, there's intermediate preppers, and there's expert preppers. Bare bones preppers are like a lot of people in my home state of Oklahoma, especially in my community. I live in Moore, and you can ask a lot of people around the country, around the United States, if they know of Moore, Oklahoma. And probably 90% of the people that you ask about Moore, Oklahoma will tell you that Moore is synonymous with tornado. So everybody in my community is at least a bare bones prepper. Everybody is prepared for severe weather to happen in a moment's notice, because when you live in Oklahoma, you have to be prepared for a blinding snowstorm one day and then severe weather the next day, because that's how the weather patterns are here in Oklahoma. And then you have the intermediate preppers, which is where I kind of rate myself. I rate myself between intermediate and expert. I am in no way an expert prepper, but I put myself a little bit above intermediate, but way below expert, but not quite exactly intermediate. I know it sounds confusing, but I'm prepared for a lot of things to happen, but I'm not prepared for everything to happen. So that's where I kind of rate myself. And then you have the expert preppers. These guys are prepared for anything. They're prepared for war. They're prepared for nuclear fallout. They're prepared for all kinds of stuff. And they can probably last 3 to 5 years in their area, in their homestead, wherever they are. They can last and sustain themselves for a very long time. And that's why I put them in the expert column of the preppers. But everybody is a prepper in some sort of way. And what I'm getting at is, if you're not, you need to be. Because we live in a day and age now where something like Ferguson can happen in a moment's notice anywhere in the nation. And I think that was brought to light because all these protests that came out of the Ferguson protest. You had the protests in New York, the protests in San Diego, all over the country. There were protests. There's protests here in Oklahoma. There was protests in Atlanta. It was just all over the place, and it happened fast. You have to be prepared for things like this to happen, not just violent protests, but other things as well. Be prepared for big blackouts and things like that. But I'm really focusing today on the violent protest aspect of it, because I feel like this is something that's going to happen more and more often as time goes on. I was talking to a few Facebook friends of mine, and we were talking about the Ferguson deal, and I said, this is my opinion, but I feel like, this whole Ferguson situation is going to be something that's going to set the precedent for things that are to come for the U.S. You know, we're kind of in a fragile state right now, and this is just obviously these are my opinions. Everybody has opinions, and I respect y'all's opinions. So just hear me out. I feel like the U.S. is in a fragile state right now, um, with the widespread uh, media outlets we have. The big news like CNN, Fox News, and all these big media conglomerates that all they want to do is force feed us the idea that everything is black and white. And when I say black and white, I mean race, because CNN has been racially basing all of their reports and everything. That especially with the stuff that's been having to do with Ferguson. If you've watched any of the CNN stuff, it's ridiculous and it's sickening how racially based their stuff is. But it's starting to sever ties in America, and you can see it starting to happen. um, there's becoming this stigma where it's kind of making black people look at white people a little bit differently, and it's making white people look at black people a little bit differently. And I'm not sugarcoating it, because that's what's happening, because people are buying in to all these big news. They're buying into all these big news outlets, and they're taking what all these news people say, taking it to heart, and it's causing people to hate each other. And I I don't want to go too far into it, but I feel like that's what's happening, and I feel like with all the publicity of the negative things that police officers have been doing lately. um, you know, Videos and reports of police officers doing things that aren't so good have been far outweighing the good things that police officers have been doing in our communities. And that's causing a huge tension between each community and their law enforcement agency. Obviously, Ferguson has a there's such a separation between the Ferguson Police Department and the Ferguson community that I don't know if they're ever going to make amends with each other, and that's scary. You shouldn't have to fear your law enforcement agency. You should be able to respect them. You should be able to go to them with your problems and your concerns. And the people in Ferguson aren't going to be able to do that. You know, um, but like I said, you know, communities are becoming further and further separated from their law enforcement agencies. The more and more, um, with well, let me back up. With each report of a negative happening that has to do with police officers, um, it's causing people to respect law enforcement agencies less and less. And a few bad apples will ruin the batch. That's the way I look at it. I've grown up, in a law enforcement family. I'm not a law enforcement officer myself, but I've grown up around them. I have family. I have law enforcement officers in my family, and I know from experience that there are good cops out there, and there are officers that really genuinely want to make a difference in their community, and they want to help people. They want to see their community succeed, but you get the few bad apples that will ruin the batch, and it makes all of the law enforcement officers look bad. And that's what sucks. Now people are scared every time they get pulled over because of all these law enforcement, all these shootings and all this stuff that's been happening and all this, you know, there's shootings, there's officer involved shootings that are justified all the time. And you hardly ever see anything positive that comes from a law enforcement involved shooting. It's always negative in the eyes of reporters and things like that, and the media makes it 150 times worse than what it really should be. So I'm not gonna rant about that for too much longer. It gets to me because the media, a lot of the tension can be traced back to the media. And I made a podcast about that before. I'm gonna stop talking about it. Um, Three things to think about for when violent protests come to your town. Um, I would like to say this is an if violent protests come to your town, but in my eyes, it seems to me, especially if you live in a major metropolitan area, that it's a when violent protests come to your town situation. The first thing to think about is, are you in immediate danger? Where you're at that moment in time, are you in immediate danger? Because if you are, you need to remove yourself from that area. And obviously, you want to have multiple areas set up in advance to where you know or you have or you feel like they would be a safe area to go to. You want to have multiple, and I say multiple because if you have one that's compromised and the only other place you have to go is your home, which is also compromised, then you're screwed. You don't want to be left without a plan. Excuse me. So you want to have multiple areas to go to just in case one or the other is compromised. So to get yourself out of the immediate danger that you found yourself in. The next thing to think about is, can you survive in your home or apartment? Where your home is or where your apartment is, can you survive there in the midst of all the protests and stuff going on? If you live outside, let's say you live in a suburb of St. Louis, kind of like Ferguson. Ferguson's a suburb of St. Louis, and you live in Ferguson, but the major happenings are in St. Louis. I think it's safe to say you would be okay staying in your home if you did live in Ferguson. So that's something to think about. Now, if your home is a mile away, half a mile away, 2 blocks away from where the heart of the protest is, I would say, it's only a matter of time before before the diameter, before the range of the protest reaches where your home is or where your apartment is. So it might not be safe to stay there if you're within that close of a proximity. Uh, and the last thing to think about is, do you have all the things necessary to survive in your home or your apartment for at least 72 hours straight? I say 72 hours because that gives a good cushion. The first 24 hours are obviously probably going to be the most hectic, as we saw with the Ferguson protest. The first 24 hours after the decision was released, um, that was really, ground zero. That was your first 24 hours were the worst. That's when the buildings were burned and the police cars were burned, and all the major stuff happened was in the first 24 hours. At least in the next 24 hours, if the National Guard isn't there already, the National Guard will probably be there, and things will start to get mitigated a little bit better than the previous 24 hours. So, but I give 72 hours as a good cushion. Can you survive in your home for 72 hours without leaving, without opening your door? If you answer yes to that, then you should be good to go as long as your home isn't in any immediate danger. Um, and obviously, ways to prepare for violent protest. Obviously, you want to have 3 to 5 days of food and water in your home. You don't want to be caught without 3 to 5 days of food and water in your home. And that's not just for violent protest. This isn't just to prepare for violent protest. You want to have 3 to 5 days of food and water in your home at all times for anything. Um, obviously, if there's a big blackout, you're not going to be able to go down to the local store and get everything you need because the registers are going to be down and it's going to be chaos. So you got to think about that. 3 to 5 days of food and water in the home at least. I would recommend you have through a little more than 3 to 5 days of food and water, but That's up to you. At least have 3 to 5 days of food and water. Think about your home defense. Um, if you feel safe staying in your home, if you feel like your home or your apartment is in an okay area, you don't feel like you're going to be in any immediate danger. You need to think about your home defense situation. Can you defend your home? Can you defend your family if somebody does decide to come kick in your door thinking they're going to loot your house? Um, there's a lot of people are pro gun and a lot of people are anti gun. Um, I always try to tell people that are anti gun that it's you can be anti gun, um, but everybody should have a way to defend themselves in the home. Your home is your sanctuary. It's your domain. It's where you and your family live, and it's something that is worth protecting. You can be anti carry. People who are against people carrying guns and own a gun to keep yourself safe, keep it in the home, whatever. So I always try to tell people just that's something to think about. How are you going to defend your home against somebody who has a gun in their hand when they kick your door in? So that's something to think about too. Um, have all your entrances and exits covered. Obviously you don't want to just twist the lock on your doorknob and call it good because people will still be able to get in your home. You have to be constantly vigilant when a situation like that arises in your home defense. What to do when you're forced to bug out? This is a big one. If you're forced to bug out, obviously, like I mentioned before, you want to have multiple areas that you can be able to resort to. You have to have multiple areas to bug out. Obviously, you're going to have a number one, a number two, and a number three area. If your number one's compromised, then you move on to your number two, and if your number two's compromised, you move on to your number three, and so on and so forth. You want to have enough spread out and far out around the city and outside of the city that you can make it to. These can be friends' homes, families' homes, um, even if it's a hotel that's an hour away. Just somewhere that you can meet. Um, if you're separated from your family, which that's another thing that I forgot to cover. If you're separated from your family when something like this starts, everybody needs to know, where the first places are to meet. If you have kids who drive, um, you need to go over with them. Look, if something like this happens, and it's going to sound ridiculous to your kids unless they're just into the whole prepping thing like their parents, but 9 times out of 10, they're going to think you're ridiculous. But when shit hits the fan, you have to be prepared, and your family has to be prepared with you. If you're separated, 9 times out of 10, something like this is going to happen, and you're not going to be with everybody in your family. You got to be able to meet up. You got to be able to be sure everybody's safe. So have multiple places, um, ready to go. Have everybody know where these places are by heart. Be able to get to them without a GPS, and that's very very important, especially if you're separated from your family. So, but being forced to bug out can be scary. Um, if you're in the midst of the city and let's say your home is compromised, you're going to have to bug out. If you feel like you need to get home to get something, you need to get home to let the dog out, whatever. Think about that. Is it worth risking your life over? Is it worth risking your life, your well-being to go and get your phone charger? Maybe not. You gotta weigh the pros and cons of going through the hot zone. I'll just call it the hot zone. You got to risk the pros and cons of going through the hot zone to get to your home to get those things. Everybody should have a bag with them with stuff ready to go, extra phone chargers, stuff, whatever. Everybody should keep a bag like that in their vehicle. That way, if shit does hit the fan and you're away from your home, you don't have to make it back to the house to be able to survive. So these are all things to think about, because I believe that it's a when it's going to happen situation, not an if. And of course, most preppers do believe that. But with the way that things have been going in in our country, lately. It seems like, you know, America is just on edge. Everybody's on edge. The police officers are on edge. Um, the citizens are on edge. And the way I see it is because of the citizens being so on edge with all the law enforcement shootings and things like that, it forces the police officers to be even more on edge because it's you see the snowball effect here. The citizens become on edge and they become antsy and they're starting not to trust the law enforcement. Well, law enforcement sees that and they feel that and they become even more on edge because they're like, look, these people are waiting. These people are, seconds away from snapping. They might pull somebody over who is just at wit's end with law enforcement, and somebody's going to snap, and that's going to cause one of those big things to happen, and it's going to be a Ferguson situation all over again. And that's what these cops and law enforcement agencies are thinking about. So it's a revolving door of tensions that build, and tensions are high right now as it is. So things that build tensions are no good. Things like this Ferguson protest and all this stuff, not good, not good for the country. And it seems like things like this are becoming more frequent, more prominent, and we just need to be prepared. So, with that being said, I think I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you guys for listening, and I hope everybody stays safe out there. I hope none of this ever happens in any of y'all's community, but if it does, I want you guys to be prepared and I want you guys to stay alive and survive. So, thank you guys for listening. We're going to try to do some more videos here in the future. I'm getting ready to get some new stuff up for review, and we'll just see how everything goes here in the near future. Thank you guys for listening. We'll talk to y'all later. Have a good one.